Back to McCarthy Performance. Today we'll be finishing up on the 383. I'll be putting the profiler heads on it. Um, we'll be using the ARP bolts, Felpro head gaskets. I'll go over some finer details on that. It's going to be a pretty basic video, but you might pick something up on it. But this is the way that I do this. So I'm just letting you know that if you have another way, that's great. This is my way. I've been doing this way for, geez, I don't know, 40 years. So, I appreciate the comments, guys. Um, I guess if you have something negative to say, you know, the old saying, if you don't have nothing good to say, don't say nothing at all. That being said, uh, you know, I hope you enjoy the video, I guess. So, like I said, this is going to be a pretty basic video. We're just going to go over some details on some of the smaller things. Somebody that hasn't done this type of job, they may get some information out of this video. I hope they do. And people that don't get anything out of this video, well, please sit back and maybe you can yell at the TV and get some enjoyment that way. Um, we'll start out with the head gaskets. But before we start out with the head gaskets, this is the ones that I use. I don't like using a bigger firing ring, that would be this here, than I need to. It's a 30 over. This is a 4/80 thousandths bore head gasket. Don't need anything bigger. Don't want nothing bigger. This is the way I've always tried to do it. Sometimes you don't have that option. When I have that option, I always want to go with a smaller firing ring. Obviously, you don't want it hanging into the combustion chamber, but then again, you don't want the thing 5 miles out. When I bore and hone an engine, I always try to use, if it's going to have head bolts, I try to use the head bolts that we're going to use. If it's a stud engine, I will use studs. There's not much option there. It will have a deck plate on it. Everything I do here, I really try to do with a deck plate. I know there's a lot of controversy there, but hang on because I'm going to be making a video on deck plates. Do you need them or not? You know what? I'm going to use them. I want to use them. Every job that comes out of my shop pretty much is going to have a deck plate on it. That's the heads up for the next video that I'll probably be making. Okay, we're going to use the torque and we're going to use the head gasket and we're going to use the same lube as on the deck plate as what the final head will have. We can get into discussions on distortion of the block and everything. Yes, that happens. Yeah, when I hone a block, I torque up the main caps. Yeah, that's a given. And I deburr the cylinder walls on the bottom. I think you've seen that. I do a lot of prep. When I do use a head gasket on a big block, small block, Felpro goes through the trouble of putting an instruction sheet in the head gasket. It's a very good idea to read it. You can get into all sorts of problems not reading it. They want you to do certain things. You got to make sure that the block is set up for that. I recommend doing that before assembly. If you've got to drill holes or do different things, and on some gaskets you will, and I won't get into all of them, but I did make a big block video on gaskets, Felpros, in going over that and the modifications you have to do. Failing to do this can cause you a world of hurt. You'd be surprised that GM sometimes leaves out. And you got to be careful because I've had small blocks that had one side that were drilled and the other side wasn't. So you got to be aware of this. Don't rush through it. Take your time. Hey, if you got to spend an hour or half an hour checking things out, it's so much better to do it than rushing through the job and then have to take it all apart. Accidents happen, things happen. I'm not perfect, but I'm just telling you, don't rush this stuff. Take your time, read this instructions. They waste their time to put that in there. They're not putting it in there just for the heck of it. They're putting it in there for a reason. So let's go over to getting the head bolts ready. Now, on the washers, they have a radius cut into them. They have a chamfer cut into them. Let's back up. They got a chamfer cut in them because the bolt has a radius on it. What's that mean? That means that this area here, the bolt, has got a radius. It's a fillet. It's a little thicker there. It's not a straight cut. Now, when you use these, they have a chamfer cut into them. They go like that. You want to make sure that you do that. You'd be surprised. Engines that I take apart, that I find that they've put these on backwards. Take your time. I'm going to lube everything up with ARP because it's such nasty, messy stuff. I'm going to lube everything up. I'm going to put all the washers on. I'm going to wipe the washers down. I'm going to wash my hands because when that ARP lube gets on these cylinder heads, when they're as cast, it's a devil to get off. And I like to try to keep everything nice and clean. Small block Chevys have an intermediate head bolt. This is the intermediate head bolt. This head bolt goes in the corners of the block, or the head, in the corners of the block. Okay, that's where that bolt goes. That bolt is longer than the standard bolt. These standard bolts go through the middle of the head, the center of the head. Obviously, short ones go on the short end of the head. You want to check when you get your ARPs that even though they're recommended for the head, you want to make sure your engagement is correct. You want to make sure the length is right before you drive them down into the block. Now, in a small block Chevrolet and some big blocks, they are wet, meaning that you will have to put a lubricant on these. Now, there's different lubricants and there's different ways of doing this. I have my opinions on some lubricants and sealers, lubricant/sealers, let's call them. This is what I use. It's sticky, it's gooey, and it's nasty stuff. But I've used Aviation Permatex for 40 years. I've never had a problem with it that I know of. Knock on wood. I'll see that, and tomorrow I'll have a problem with it. But normally when I put them in with that, or even studs, I don't have too much of a problem. I've used Teflon from ARP, and I don't like it. If you love it, great. Keep using it. I don't like it. I had problems with it. I won't use it. End of story. If you use a Teflon paste, I'm not recommending this brand, but if you use a Teflon paste, be aware that your torque values can change with that, because if you use Manley head bolts and you use that paste on them, you'll probably hourglass them. Manley makes a okay head bolt. They're not the grade of material as ARP. That's a fact. Don't want to argue it with anybody. I've hourglassed Manleys trying to torque them. So that's where we're going to go. I'm going to lube these up, and I'm going to do a couple that's pretty simple. I put a little bit of ARP lube, and you don't have to use a lot because it goes a little bit, goes a long ways, and that's probably too much. So like my buddy on Vice Grip Garage says, that's perfect. So you take that, you put it on there, you wipe it there. Okay, that one's set. The washer is going to be a bearing surface. What's that mean? That means when you torque it up, it's going to rotate and it's going to allow you to get to a certain torque without running into excessive amount of friction. So you want to cut that down somewhat, but you don't want to free all the friction because that's a slippery slope, and I'm not a fastener engineer, but if you make it too slippery, you could probably hourglass it like if you use Teflon on a Manley head bolts. Okay, so you just take a little bit and make sure your chamfer is going towards the top head of the bolt, and put a little bit on. And like I said, a lot of this goes a long ways. I'll do all these and I'll wash everything up because, man, this stuff is just nasty. But you need a certain amount of lubricant, and every kind of lubricant or slash sealer that goes on the head bolt is going to affect the fastener in different ways. Teflon's going to be different than oil. Oil's going to be different than ARP lube, etc., etc., on and on. So what do? A lot of guys use different type of lubricants on this because they don't like these. They achieve the stretch that they want on the rod bolts, and a lot of guys don't use this. I keep using this because ARP sends it with their fasteners. It's messy. I've used other types of lubricant, and the deal is if they give you a stretch rate on the rod bolts, it isn't such a big deal. But if they go through the trouble of sending you the stuff, it's not a bad idea to use it. Now, if you can't exceed the stretch that you need, and we're talking about rod bolts now, then maybe you can try something else. And I'm not going to mention the other brands, but if they send you a lubricant and you use oil, well, that's gonna affect the stretch. So on these, it's not as critical as your rods, but still, if they send it, I use it. It's messy, but it works. So we've gone through and we've done most of the small bolts, and I kind of like to do them ahead of time if possible. Seeing how I'm making this video here, we're going to do them ahead of time. Most of the time I like to kind of go through the bolts and make sure that there's none that are shorted, or maybe nuts that aren't threaded, or washers that are deformed or defective. ARP is just like everybody else. Nobody's 100% perfect. It's really good, and it's your job as the final assembler to quality check this stuff. I'd like to say that it isn't, but basically it is. No matter if you like it or you don't, you're the ultimate decision maker. If you don't like the way something is, don't use it. Don't use it. And if you use it and you don't think it's right and it breaks, don't blame it on the company. You're the guy that put it on. So as cruel as that sounds, that's kind of the reality of this whole business. And lately it's been more and more that you have to quality control and quality check everything. And we ain't going to get into whether that's fair or not. Okay, so here's the 383. I keep everything covered when I'm not working on it. As soon as I'm done working on it, I cover everything. Like I said, my shop is not the most sterile environment I would like, but I try to keep it as clean and not having a lot of things going on in the shop. Ultimately, the reality of it is that sometimes things have to be done in the shop. So that's why I keep everything covered up. If I'm working on it, if I'm running the mill or something and I'm not working on it and it's clean and I'm assembling it, I'll put a bag over it. I try to keep everything clean. That's very important, but that's basic. So we've got the 3D3. I know guys that like to show off, and I've built engines and short blocked engines for guys, and they live on gravel roads, and the garage door will be open, and I see the engine standing out there naked to the world. That stuff drives me completely bonkers. I'm not saying I'm the, this is the perfect environment, but it's a better environment than being on a gravel road with your garage door open and you building your engine. I painted cars for an awful long time, and if I could, I would still be painting cars. I loved painting cars. I loved doing body work. That was my main passion in life. I started when I was you know, 12 years old, and when my mom would go to work, I would bring in my fender of my 34 Ford truck, and I would metal finish the fender in my bedroom and then vacuum up the floor. And but you know, so I know a little bit about dirt and how dirt travels, and I've painted cars in spray booths, and I've sprayed cars in open rafter garages, and I've been able to get amazing results. It's just you got to watch the dirt, you got to watch the dust, you got to be aware of that. So we try to do that when I build engines. And the experience that I learned painting cars and doing body work, you know, that's where that came from. So we're going to get it out, and we're going to rotate it. We're going to put the heads, start putting the heads on it. And yeah, my shop's just like everybody else's. If it's a flat spot and it's solid, it ends up being a shelf. And I've got a lot of shelf space. I got a flow bench over there, and I really try hard not to make it a high expensive fancy shelf. So we're going to put this head on. We're going to start over here. I've indexed the dampener. I know where top dead center is. You've probably seen that video. If you don't, you see this one, say, well, you didn't do that. It's been done. So we've done all that. So we're going to wipe out the cylinder walls just to get a little bit of oil and whatever is in there out. They've been wiped plenty of times. They'll be wiped more. I wiped the oil off the deck. Don't be surprised if you get the oil, you get the cylinder walls, you wipe them down with oil, and you get the towel and it comes out clean. You run the rings up and down a few times, you're going to get some oxidization, you're going to get some breakdown, you're going to get some material, the plating off the rings, that's all going to end up showing up on your paper towel. Now what I'm going to do is I usually like to put a couple squirts of oil in it, because I don't know how long this is going to set, and I know the guy, and I'm assuming as soon as I get it to him, he's going to fire it up. But things happen, plans change. Somebody moved my adjustable wrench. But anyways, things change, and I like to put a little oil on them just in case you're going to set for a while. So we'll move that piston off top dead center to about there. We'll put a little couple squirts of oil in there, and we'll start getting going and putting the heads on it. Now getting back, this is the way I do it. You know, you do it any way you want. Usually up by the China rails here, I put a little bit of aviation on it. Now the gasket is printed, sealed, and you don't have to do this, but you know, I just do it. You know, it's a second. It don't cost nothing. That's what I do right there. That's it. Everything else is good to go. I don't usually do too much to the gaskets when they come out of the box. They're pretty good to put on. We're looking at the firing ring. We're back behind the chamfer on the cylinder wall. You always want to make sure that we look good. There's no problem there. I'm looking everything over for the final time before I put the so-called lid on it. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to put the top story on this house. Okay, I have a bolt all lubed up. It's ready to go. speed handle also to go, so that head won't fall off. So we'll start putting all the bolts in the head, and there's videos of me assembling these heads. I think there's actually me welding on these heads. You wouldn't think you'd have to weld on a brand new head. Boy, I got news for you. Watch my videos. Yeah, you know, when it's a question of sending the head back and waiting for the head, or firing up the TIG welder and taking care of a little problem that's only takes 20 minutes to do, I'm going to do it. Is it right? You know, I don't really want to go down that road. Boy, things lately are just a real crap show in this business. But, you know, I'm hoping it'll get better. But it sure don't seem like it's gonna. But if you don't have a welder, or if you don't have, all you have is basic tools, God help you, because things are getting worse. And I hate to be negative, but I'm just trying to be a realist here. So we'll start putting the bolts in the heads. And get back to that, because you know, really, once you've seen one head bolt go in, you've probably seen them all. I mean, there's really no trick to it. I put everything together with a speed handle. I've talked about that before. I don't like power operated tools for installing stuff. If you disassemble an engine with a power tool, that's fine, as long as you make sure you put it in, you're not, you know, you got it in the right direction. You're not tightening up your rod bolts until they snap off, because if you hand them to me and you want them fixed, I'm going to be unhappy with you. You know, there's a place for everything, I believe, and using the right tool is good judgment. And, you know, sometimes it just doesn't pay to hurry. So I'm going to finish putting this head on, and then we'll get to the other head. And this video will probably be me just yeah, I don't get it. A lot of guys tease me, young kids tease me about my speed handles, but you know, I don't have to plug this thing into the wall and wait for it to charge up. If you gotta drive your bolts with an electric driver, you need to talk to somebody. I didn't say my channel didn't come with opinions. I got them, you know, they probably stink, just like the old saying goes, but you know, that's just my opinion. You put the wrong bolt in the wrong place and you drive it in with a power driver and something goes sideways, you'll be wishing you put it in by hand. Okay, we're looking at the guide plates, the adjustable eskies. We're going to put them on, and you know, there's really nothing trick to them. Once you get the push rods on the lifters, you can adjust the trackability of them, and there's quite a bit of slot here. You can weld them, or you don't have to weld them. It's up to you. I don't do nothing to them until I get these. Sometimes you have to modify these, and you have to trim down on the leg, and you know, for adjustment. Sometimes, I'm not saying every time, but you know, sometimes you gotta. Sometimes again, you got to get creative. Like I said, you just sometimes stuff fits, sometimes it don't. Be ready for it not to fit. That way, when it fits, you'll be so happy you won't know how to act. So we're going to put a little oil on the ones that are blind, and we'll put a little sealer on the ones that go through the intake port. So we'll start just putting them on, just a big block Chevrolet 7/16 stud, top bottom, or Ford Pontiac, you know, this is just a universal stud for a 7/16 top and bottom. I'm having a little problem talking today. But anyhow, so I prefer to use a 7/16 top and bottom rocker stud in any application that I can do it in. I'll make the effort to drill it, the head, or whatever to use this type of rocker stud. Okay, so we're gonna put them all in. There might be an outside chance we might have to do a little fabricating on them, a little trimming with the belt sander. And you know, if you look, you see this one, you know, is all the way to the end of the slot for it. You most certainly don't want to open the slot up any bigger. In fact, sometimes if there's room, I'll put a thin hardened washer under here, but that's not necessarily always the rule of thumb. But you know, what do you do? A custom set of heads. Some guide plates fit really good, and some guide plates they don't fit at all. And some of the overseas ones, they're so soft, they're not right. And so it's worth the money to get these, even if, you know, we may not need that fully adjustable style. If I'm going to buy a guide plate, I'm going to buy one that's fully adjustable, because the price difference isn't going to be no more. And especially if you buy the wrong ones and you can't get the adjustment out of them, then you're looking at buying another set. So we're going to not put any sealer on these. We did put a little oil on these, of course. We're going to snug them up a little bit. We're going to give them a dry run. I think what we're going to find out is we're going to have to trim a little bit on here, which I really don't like to do, but you know, we got to do it because they're hitting. And I got a feeling that we're going to be trimming these legs down a little bit. If you look at the way the tracking is, we're all the way that way with everything, and we're crashing into the head bolt here. And you look at we're up against the intake port. So I got a feeling that we'll be rubbing on the intake port before we'll be using the guide to help guide the push rod. So we're definitely going to be doing some work on these, and that's going to be for another video, because I'm going to bag the engine up and get it out of the way, because we're going to have to do some work on the guide plates. So I think that's where we're going to end this video. Thank you for watching.